Elite Facts presents
Another 7 badass weapons from history.
7.
1862 Gatling gun. If you're looking for innovation on the battlefield, look no further than the 1862 incarnation of the Gatling gun. The 1862 Gatling gun is one of the best-known early rapid-fire spring-loaded hand-cranked weapons and a forerunner of the modern machine gun. This weapon was a major game-changer during the American Civil War. This weapon was centered on a cyclic multi-barrel design which facilitated cooling and synchronized the firing-reloading sequence. Each barrel fired a single shot when it reached a certain point in the cycle, after which it ejected the spent cartridge, loaded a new round, and in the process allowed the barrel to cool somewhat. The main thing that sets this weapon apart from its later successors is the fact that it runs off of a crank-operated system and was fairly portable, as the weapon is mounted to a frame with 2 large wheels on either side. Now, by today's standards, that's very counterproductive. However, back then it didn't matter, as this 170-plus pound automatic weapon essentially ruled the battlefield. This gun was standard issue, even past the introduction of automatic weapons, as it was used from 1862 up until 1911.
6.
Greek fire. You may remember we covered this weapon in our list based on the Byzantine Empire, but we figured that this weapon is just too badass to not include on this list. So you might think napalm is a rather recent invention, created in Harvard labs in 1942, but what is believed to be an early form of napalm was created and used by the Byzantines in 672 AD. It became known as Greek fire. In its day, it was practically a super weapon and proved to be devastating in battle. It was usually delivered by means of a type of flamethrower that would spew the burning liquid towards a target with devastating effect. Like napalm, it was sticky and would burn on water. This made it especially useful in naval warfare, as wooden ships would either be engulfed in an unquenchable flame or face a literal sea of fire. Its ignition is said to have sounded like divine thunder, and it could also be deployed in bomb form from pots. The recipe for this terror weapon was such a closely guarded state secret that even today, scientists and historians alike are still not sure how exactly they made it.
5.
Sith chariot. This is quite possibly the best vehicle to be showcased in the 1951 blockbuster film Ben-Hur. Well, second best. The film allegedly hit a Ferrari in the chariot race scene after all. We're pretty certain that we can all agree that this is pretty badass. Sure, it's cheating a little bit, as this is technically more of a vehicle rather than strictly being a weapon. However, we're counting it. A Sith chariot was a war chariot with 1 or more blades mounted on both ends of the axle. The Sith chariot was pulled by a team of 4 horses and manned by a crew of up to 3 men, 1 driver and 2 warriors. Theoretically, the Sith chariot would blow through infantry lines, cutting combatants in half, or at least opening gaps in the line which could be exploited. It was quite a challenge to get horses to charge into the tight phalanx formation of the Greek Macedonian hoplites. The Sith chariot avoided this inherent problem by cavalry, by the Sith cutting into the formation even when the horses avoided the men. The blades on the sides of this vehicle extended out horizontally for a meter. Xenophon, an eyewitness, described these Sith chariots at the Battle of Cunaxa, saying, quote, "These had thin Siths extending at an angle from the axle and also under the driver's seat, turning towards the ground."
4.
Thompson submachine gun. Okay, so there might be a bit of bias with this one. Personally, we think this weapon is awesome, just due to how reliable it was. Invented by John T. Thompson in 1918, this submachine gun became infamous due to its ties to both law enforcement and criminals during the Prohibition years in America, as this gun was essentially showcased throughout all forms of media available at the time. Because of its links to this time period, it's gained nicknames such as Chicago Typewriter, Chicago Organ Grinder, Chicago Style, and Chicago Piano. Capone and Dillinger would be so proud. Anyway, not only was this gun closely associated with the world of crime, this weapon was also standard issue for those in the U.S. military from 1938 up until 1971, and it's still currently being used by other military forces across the globe. The gun features a large .45 caliber ACP cartridge, accuracy, and high volume of automatic fire. It has since gained popularity among civilian collectors thanks to its historical significance.
3.
Urumi. So, did you ever wonder what it would be like if a whip had sex with a sword? Well, urumi is essentially the outcome, and it's certainly a dangerous beast of a weapon. Originating in South Asia, the blade of the urumin was made of extremely bendable metal that, when not in use, could be wrapped around the waist like a belt. Blade lengths differed, but urumi could reach lengths of 3 to 5 meters, or 12 to 16 feet. The main technique used with the urumi was to whip the weapon in circles, thus creating a defensive zone difficult for an opponent to penetrate. With both sides of the blade sharpened, it was extremely dangerous, even for the wielder, and it required years of training. Even simple things like stopping the weapon and changing directions were considered special skills that were difficult to master. Due to the unique fighting style, urumi could not be used in battle formations and were better suited for hand-to-hand combat and assassinations. Yet despite the stringent requirements for wielding one properly, they were an unstoppable force once mastered. Parrying proved almost useless against urumi because even if an opponent tried to stop it with a shield, the urumi would just bend around it to strike. Needless to say, even if this weapon was blunt, it would still do serious damage. This weapon is awesome.
2,
Axe gun. That alone sounds like the greatest thing ever. Nearly every culture has made at least one version of a gun-blade combination. Not only do they look cool, and sound cool for that matter, but they also offer a lot of versatility when in combat. Let's take the most obvious example, bayonets. Bayonets were widely popular during the Crimean War and the American Civil War, probably two of the most famous modern examples. However, this certainly isn't the earliest conception of a firearm being combined with a sharp melee weapon. This hybrid has been around since the first Chinese fire lances in the 10th century. However, we're not here to talk about the earliest examples of these hybrid weapons or the most well-known and widely used weapons like the bayonet. The most badass hybrid weapon belongs to Germany, as they managed to invent the axe gun. Some of the most well-preserved examples of the German axe guns currently reside in the Historisches Museum in Dresden and date from the mid to late 1500s. These ornately carved pieces featured heavy battle axes on the barrels of wheel-lock firearms. Some could be used as a chopper and a shooter simultaneously, while others were primarily axes that revealed a gun barrel when the axe head was removed. They were likely developed for cavalry, which explains the extended handles on what would otherwise be a pistol.
1,
Khopesh. Also known as sickle sword, the ancient Egyptian khopesh was more of a cross between a sword and a battle axe. I mean, if it was just that, it would still be badass, but still. Anyway, during other Egyptian times, the mace represented ruling power, but the khopesh's deadliness on the battlefield eventually made it the preferred status symbol of Egypt's elite. Even Ramses II was depicted wielding one of these beasts. The khopesh was a weapon that was believed to have been created during the Bronze Age. This meant that it was usually cast out of a single piece of bronze and could be quite heavy. It's believed to have been an Egyptian adaptation of a large two-handed weapon similar to a war axe, imported from Canaan and Mesopotamia. The blade of this weapon had a pronounced curve, much like that of the sickle. However, unlike the sickle, only the outside edge was sharpened. Much like the battle axe, the khopesh could be used as a hacking weapon, though its shape also made it efficient at slashing. The inner part of the curve was equally functional and could trap an arm or yank away an opponent's shield. Some had small snares for that very purpose. Did we leave any badass weapons off of our list? What's your favorite historical weapon? Let us know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.
Don't forget to like us and subscribe for more Elite Facts.